Welcome to episode 37 of the FoodGrads Podcast, the podcast where we explore careers in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. I'm your host, Veronica Hislop, a molecular science graduate student and career partner with FoodGrads. This week on the podcast, I interviewed Robert Cunliffe, maintenance manager and millwright at Flamaglo Foods Limited. On this week's episode, Robert and I talked about what it's like being both a maintenance manager and millwright mechanic, and why he decided to get into his career path. We spent a lot of time focusing on what he does daily and the overall work environment at a manufacturing plant. I always wondered what the process was like getting a new piece of equipment from a mechanic's point of view and how they actually learn to use such equipment and also how to maintain it. There's such intricate pieces, so it was really interesting to learn more about that. Finally, I picked Robert's brain on what he thinks the future of being a millwright looks like, the skills that he thinks are important for the job, and his experience going for an electrical certification. So, enough with that introduction. Let's get on with the show. How are you? Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you on speakerphone in my truck. I ended up having to work a little bit late and go pick up a motor at a motor winding shop. So I'm just on my way back to work to drop it off.
Okay, let me get myself situated. I have my questions in front of me, so I guess if you want to get started, I'm ready. Okay.
Alrighty, well, fire away with the questions.
Okay.
Like I say, I'll do my best to answer.
Okay, awesome. I'm ready. Thanks, Rob. I'm curious to know more about what you do. It's always hard to get people who are in your kind of work to get a hold of them. You guys are kind of elusive online, I find, so I'm happy to be able to actually catch you to do this.
So my daily duties change every day to a certain degree. I've got a dual role. So I am the maintenance manager, but I'm also the only licensed millwright on staff. I have one maintenance helper that works under me, and as knowledgeable as he is on running the equipment, he's not nearly as knowledgeable when it comes to repairing it. So he leans a little bit on me to help with the repairs.
I was wondering about that because as your role is, like you said, it's a maintenance manager, but I know for a lot of companies, that's its own job, and then being a millwright is definitely another defined role for another individual.
Yeah, I could certainly spend 8 hours a day doing the managerial role with no issues. The millwrighting or the maintenance mechanic portion of it, some days I could spend the full 8 hours. Other days it's only an hour or two here, and other days it's not at all. The maintenance manager role, it's very time consuming.
Well, to that, would you be able to tell me about what the two different roles actually are? Because just so I have a better understanding.
Okay, so I'll start with the easier one, and that is the millwright or the mechanic portion, and that is the day-to-day responsibilities would be daily PMs on the machines to require them, looking after any breakdowns that happen on any of the equipment, possibly helping to set equipment up when operators are unfamiliar with setting up that piece of equipment, and just really trying to keep the shop clean, organizing work for the next day or the next couple of days, talking with operators to see how the machines are running, if they're having any problems with the machines. That's basically the day for a millwright where I'm at.
Okay. To that question, I know that you do work at Flamaglo Foods. What type of machinery is there and what type of products do they produce?
So the products that we produce are dairy-free yogurts. So we make our yogurt from a soybean and becomes milk, and then it becomes curd, and then it becomes yogurt. The types of equipment that I have, we have pumps, we have kettles, tanks, filling machines, and packaging machines, and of course lift trucks.
Okay. Keeping that in mind, so I guess there's multiple production lines that run throughout the day, correct?
There would be in a larger facility, but our facility is relatively small in comparison to some of the food processing and food manufacturing places out there. So I'd love to say we've got multiple lines, but in reality, we only have one line. We're only running one product at a time. So we'll start the day out making our vanilla yogurt, and then when that batch is done, then we make possibly the blueberry yogurt, and then after that batch is done, then it'd be the strawberry yogurt, and then a chocolate or something might fit in there somewhere as well.
Okay. It's a very timely product. I can only imagine, though, that the demand's going to go up with alternatives being very popular right now. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Alternatives, it's vegan, it's kosherized, it's so they've opened it up for a lot of different people.
It's really impressive how much it's really taken off in just even like 5 years compared to what the market was like in terms of dairy alternatives, especially in Canada, or at least the region we are in. To see so many of them, coconut, and just, it blows my mind, to be honest with you.
Yeah. These guys have actually been around for 18 years now.
Oh, wow. Wow.
They were a very, very small company at one point, and obviously grown it over the years. And then I got to say 6 years ago, they decided that they wanted to grow it more and have their own building. So they put the plans in place and they built their own building. The building was finished 2 years ago. They moved into it and started producing in it just over a year ago.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. That must have been, were you at the facility at the time that they did do this move?
I started with the company August 31st of last year. So I was involved with the move. Again, being the only maintenance guy, it was a lot to try and undertake. I was trying to grasp what was going where, what equipment was still required for the old facility. It was a lot to try and take in.
I could imagine. And, I know that you've done other roles besides working in the food industry. And irregardless, I would still love to kind of know about the steps that you've taken in your career to kind of get to where you are today. Like, what made you decide to go into being a millwright and such?
I just really fell into it, in all honesty. I fell into it. I've always been mechanically inclined. I've always loved working with my hands. I started with a custom metal fab company as basically just a general laborer, and I was helping them. They were doing an addition on one of their buildings, and they needed a lift truck operator to help the guys put the siding up on the side of the building, and I got voluntold to go help them and be the lift truck operator. So that's what I did. And when the exterior of the building was finished, I helped with the interior, and then they started putting some of the equipment up, paint booths and such, inside the building. And there was 3 owners to the company. The one owner was kind of like the head maintenance guy, requested that I stick around and help assist with the assembly of all the equipment in the building. And it just happened that one day his lift truck mechanic was having a hard time doing some repairs on a lift truck. He couldn't get it running. And I happened to overhear the conversation between the mechanic and the owner. So I threw my 2 cents in. And the owner said, well, do you know how to work on cars and trucks and tow motors and stuff? I said, well, tow motors is the same as a car, really. It's got a motor and wheels. I know how to get them to run. I said, all right, well, go see if you can help me get it run. And between myself and the mechanic, we got the lift truck to operate, got it back into production, and from then on, I was in maintenance.
Wow. Huh.
So I fell into it.
Do you think that that's a type of avenue that, do you think that it's as easy for someone to fall into a type of role like yours today?
It's going to be a little more challenging. That the person would have to have some sort of mechanical aptitude to want to do a millwright role. That being said, not all millwrights are doing mechanical stuff. Some of them they're more focused on certain areas of the millwright industry, because the millwright industry covers so many different aspects. There's crane operation, that sort of stuff. So you might be a millwright that's doing that, or machinery moving. Just because you're moving the machines doesn't mean you're doing a whole lot of mechanical stuff. You might be just doing the rigging and loading it up and unloading it and that sort of stuff. You could be focused 100% on hydraulics. You could be focused on the mechanical side. Maybe even pneumatics, get into doing compressors and working on compressors and that sort of stuff. Maybe you're just going to do some welding and fabricating with a little bit of mechanical or hydraulics on the side. millwrighting covers a vast array of different jobs.
I mean, I'm aware, so it doesn't really surprise me, but that's what actually kind of I find more intimidating to even, as an outsider looking in into like going, if someone was to go in this career, it seems like it's so vast and it'd be like, where the heck do I even start?
It is very challenging trying to remember all the different areas and what happens in this area and what happens in that. It is very difficult. I personally enjoy it, but I do know guys that they're more focused. They're focused on just a portion of the millwrighting trade, not everything that millwrighting encompasses.
Right. So if that ends up being the case, is it there like an overall millwrighting board, or is there more like millwrighting for, I know you just listed off some, I'm so sorry, I can't remember what you had mentioned with them all, but it's like, is there individual ones or do they all fall under the same umbrella?
You could potentially go and not be a millwright but work on hydraulics, or you could go work on a compressor and not work on anything else and not be a millwright. There's all these other trades that kind of fall under the millwright umbrella. You could focus on just that and not even get your millwright ticket and still be paid reasonably well, especially if you're good at it.
Sorry, I'm trying to think, where do I want to take these questions? What I was wondering is, with new pieces of equipment and such, like, how do you continually learn about it? Like, how do you, in your part of your career, learn about this new type of piece of machinery, or how do you learn, I guess?
The easiest way to learn is just to be hands-on, in my opinion. Now, some guys, I've worked with guys where a new piece of equipment comes in and they take that manual, because most pieces of equipment come with a manual of some sort, and they'll sit down and they'll read that from front to back, and they'll be able to go out and repair the machine or keep the machine running or do the maintenance on it. I'm more of a hands-on. I refer to the manual when there's something that I'm not understanding, or there's something that's just a little bit more challenging, or something maybe that I'm not even the slightest bit familiar with, and I'm just looking at it, scratching my head, thinking, what is that? Machine manuals are broke down into different areas of the machine. Startup, maintenance. A lot of the manuals will have I don't want to say a diagnostics, but a troubleshooting. If this happens with the machine, look at this, or look at this, or look at this, and then they'll give you a brief line or two of what to do to remedy the problem. So some guys want to know from start to finish, not just how to do the maintenance on it or how to troubleshoot it or how to do repairs. Some guys want to know how to start the machine up, how to shut it down, and how to do the repairs. And other guys, myself, I like to know that stuff, but I want to learn it from the operators. The operators know little tricks and everything. The guy that's been running the same piece of equipment for more than 6 or 8 months knows that machine better than I'm ever going to know it. And he can tell me, it doesn't sound right. Something doesn't sound right. And he can point to the general area where the unusual sound might be coming from, and then that'll help me diagnose it. Or he can tell me, it's not doing this, and it used to do this. These are the components that make it do that. And it helps me to do my job and do my job better. You have to have the good millwright will have good listening skills as well as troubleshooting skills.
See, I'm so happy that you point that out, because when I worked in quality assurance, and if there was ever a problem, I was asking the line operators first, because it's like second nature to them. And you're right, like they can catch that little noise and say, yeah, there's something wrong in this area, but and then they just give you that support and then you take it there, but they know their stuff.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. But, and then that was also another thing, and I'm wondering, so again, you were mentioning about equipment and all that, but if equipment comes in, I don't know if you would know, it almost feels like the salespeople are the ones who are involved, but then that doesn't seem right to me, that like, they're not the technical people knowing how the machines work. So I guess I'm wondering, like, how does the process of getting a new piece of equipment happen if you were doing a line extension or something?
I can absolutely answer that. I am in the process of bringing in a new piece of equipment, so I can absolutely answer that question.
Ooh, perfect timing.
So our company is in the process of bringing in a pouch filling machine. This pouch filling machine, we only have a limited amount of floor space, and they obviously, the company that's going to manufacture this needs to know how much floor space we have. One, to determine whether or not they can even get their piece of equipment to fit into this floor space, and two, to see if they can utilize the floor space for their piece of equipment. Like, maybe the piece of equipment would fit, but it's not going to operate properly. So they got to try and determine that, yeah, if we lay it out this way, it'll open, and yes, we can make it work that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to figure out, do we have enough air if it requires air? And in this case, it does. Do we have enough electrical in the building to be able to power this piece of equipment? In this case, we did. Is there somebody else that can build this piece of equipment and make it do the same thing? We wanted somebody that was Canadian. We wanted somebody that was relatively local, and we managed to find just such a company. And then we tell them what we want the machine to do, how many pouches we want it to be able to fill, whether we want to be able to do 3 or 4 different size pouches. And then they have to be able to give us enough cost associated with the tooling to be able to fill these pouches, the tooling to be able to fill these pouches. Do you want to buy all the tooling at once to be able to do all the different pouches? Or do you want to spread it out and maybe do just 2 out of the 4 different sizes that you're planning on? It's a pretty long and drawn out process too.
I was just thinking, it just amazes me when things of that scale actually get done. Like, I know it takes time and repeated communications, but it just still fascinates me, like all the things to get into consideration to finally just have a piece of equipment running. And I don't know, the amount of like people involved, the things to consider, and so many little things. It's not like a home project that you do. It's a big thing.
It is. It all depends on the size of the company, really, as to how many people are involved and the size of the piece of the equipment. I mean, I worked for a much larger company in Guelph, and they were pretty regularly bringing in new pieces of equipment. Most of the time, they were pieces that it was the same piece as something they already had, but they needed another one. So that's not a big deal. But I remember being involved we were buying a heat treat furnace, and it was myself, an electrician, an engineer, and the heat treat department supervisor. The 4 of us, in the very least, were involved in that. The 4 of us made the trip down to the U.S. to qualify the piece of equipment and tell them, yes, it does exactly what we needed to do, or no, you need to make some changes here and you need to make some changes there. And then even once we brought that piece of equipment in and got it connected and got it operational, we still found that there were problems with it, and there were things that we had to modify, and that process was probably from conception to putting it into production. It was probably close to a year.
Oh, wow. Again, because you've had the experience, how do you go about making sure that things don't get missed? Or how do you, because it almost sounds like there's a little bit of like project management that's kind of hidden in there. So I was just curious about how you deal with those types of things.
How do you make sure things don't get missed?
Yeah.
That's a really good question, because I'm pretty sure I miss something almost every day.
Okay.
Organization is the biggest one. Take notes. If you're allowed to take recordings, but you just have to be organized. And my wife will tell you, I might have a little bit of OCD, so I am a little bit organized. Even being organized, though, I still overlook things on occasion. Sometimes they're bigger items than I would have liked to have overlooked. And other times it's just something simple like a fastener, a bolt, or a nut or something. Another prime example would be I recently helped a company purchase a smaller tube filling machine. So, you know the little yogurt tubes you see in the grocery stores?
Yes, I do. I loved them when I was a kid.
Okay, so we bought a little small machine that makes those yogurt tubes. It was used. I went with one of the company owners down to the facility that had this unit. Fortunately for us, they had the unit out of service. It was in the back end of a tractor trailer. There was no lighting to go in and look at it. They didn't have the manual for it on hand. I didn't know really what I was looking at, but I had a good look at it. Everything looked like it was intact and it was there. Once the piece of equipment showed up at our facility, I got looking at it. I got the manual in my hand, and I started realizing we're missing parts. And these are parts that are critical to the operation of this piece of equipment. I reached back out to the company that we purchased it from. And of course, because they hadn't ran the machine in 6 years or 7 years, all the parts that were missing were probably put on a shelf. And because it sat on the shelf for so long, they got 5S out the door. So they didn't have the spare parts. So then I had to go back to the machine manufacturer in Taiwan to get the spare parts. And even in doing that, I still missed some parts. So it's been very aggravating. I still don't have that piece of equipment into production. And that process started back in March, I believe.
Sorry, you used a term, I think you said 5S. Could you just clarify what that is?
It's actually 6S nowadays. It's basically keeping a clean and tidy and safe shop and eliminating waste.
Oh, okay. So that's why it got thrown out, because it was a part of keeping clean.
Yeah, it's if you keep something on your shelf for more than, it's probably different at different facilities, but a lot of places if it's been on the shelf and hasn't been used in 2 years, awesome.
Oh, okay. That could be problematic.
It can be, especially if you've got older equipment and some of the stuff that's sitting on the shelf is stuff that you can no longer get.
How do you deal with that stuff too? Because even I work in a chemistry lab and I'm looking at chemical names that I have no clue what they're used for, and they haven't been open in 5 years. I'm like, do I throw it out? Because we go through so many people in our lab, and I'm like, is it going to be useful? So how do you keep organized in your shop?
So when we moved into the new facility, the guy that was handling the maintenance department before wasn't technically the maintenance guy, but he did do the maintenance. They didn't have an actual guy on staff, so they used to pay contractors to come in. He tried to keep parts that he saw failing on a regular basis in stock. So what they had for spare parts was very minimal. Since moving into the new facility, I've tried to build a little bit of a spare parts inventory. I think I got about 5, maybe 6 shelves of parts. Some of the parts are interchangeable between different pieces of equipment. Some of the parts are machine specific. So I've tried to break the shelves down into machine specific shelving. And then from there, it's these parts are for this area on that piece of equipment, and these parts are for this area on that piece of equipment.
Okay.
That's. I also have a continuous maintenance program on our computers, and I log part numbers into that, and then in that program it also says what machine it's for. It might possibly say where on the machine it goes. A larger company has that sort of inventory and that sort of stock room, I'll call it. Smaller companies, I've worked for some smaller companies, and they just really have some bins that are labeled nuts, bolts, or components for the piece of machinery, and it gets very challenging to find the spare parts. So it all depends on the size of the company as to what their spare parts inventory actually looks like, if they even have one.
See, that makes sense, but then at the same breath, like, I never thought about, again, I'm more into the impression, which I know it shouldn't be my impression, but I'm under the impression more so that, here's a bin, like you said, with the nuts and bolts, but to actually have database with, like, part stuff, I mean, it makes logical sense that would be the next step, but I just never thought of it. So that's cool.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. It's simple to overlook.
Yeah. And that also makes me think of another question that I had. So I have another impression that the job is it can be very dangerous. You want to be safe and all that. First of all, is the job super unsafe? Which I know that you have safety precautions in place. And then my other question was just, if you are working in dangerous conditions, like how do you not chicken out, I guess you could say, even though you know you're following all the necessary precautions?
Well, it doesn't matter the job. The legalities of it are you can refuse any job if you feel it's not safe or you have not had proper training. You can refuse any job that your supervisor has requested you to do. I have yet to do that. I've had a lot of jobs where I've looked at it and thought, ooh, that's a little sketchy. But I look at it and it's like, well, it's part of my job. That's just what I have to do. I need to get this piece. I look at it as the machine operator is my customer, and I need to make that customer happy. I also look at it as if that piece of machine doesn't run, that piece of machinery doesn't run, then our customers, the company that I'm working for, its customers aren't going to get their product, so our company's not going to get paid, which means I'm not going to get paid. If I'm not getting paid, I'm not coming into work here. So where am I working? That's how I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the big picture going, but there are some jobs where you have to have specialized training, like confined space. Maybe you got to go inside of a tank or a well or something. You have to take special equipment in there with you to monitor the air. You have to have a lifeline so that somebody can pull you out if you pass out or something in there, something happens to you while you're in there. You have to have a spotter sometimes. There's a lot of variables.
Well, that makes sense. I just wanted to ask was in regards to being a millwright, because I know that they are really actively looking for them in Ontario, if I'm not mistaken. I was just curious about, do you have an idea of what you think the field's going to be like in the next 10 years? Would it generally be doing the same kind of duties, or could that be evolving?
The only way it'll evolve is due to the machinery itself. But machinery's getting more and more electronic. So a millwright that wants to work on the newer equipment and enjoys electronics would be wise to possibly take some courses on electronics or even get his industrial electrician certification as well. And I kick myself for not having gotten my electrical certification, my 309A or my 409A, only because I spent 7 years working under an electrician when I first got into the trade. And it was after he left the company and saying to me on a regular basis, get into denture, become my apprentice. And he left the company and I hadn't done it. I went, oh shoot, now what do I do? And that's when I was at that very minute I went searching, and I realized millwrighting at that time, I don't know if this is still true, but at that time, somebody who wanted to become a millwright could challenge the exam, the ministry's exam, so long as they could get their competency signed off by a manager or a supervisor and their hours signed off by the same. I had that ability. I had the hours because at that time I was already in the trade for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I already had all the hours. I already had all the I thought I had all the competencies. I still think I probably could have used a few more, but I managed to get all my competencies signed off. I managed to have all my hours, but I decided I would go and take some part-time schooling at Conestoga College.
Mm-hmm.
And I took the schooling after hours. It took me 5 years to complete all the schooling because I had to do prerequisites before I could even get into the industrial maintenance mechanic course. I did my prereqs. I did the 4 years of the schooling, and I come out. Now I've got 12 years into the trade. I come out with carrying a 4.0 GPA in all my courses, and I still failed the millwright exam on my first attempt.
What? Oh, wow. I'm sorry. It just that really
Caught you off
surprises
guard
me.
with that. Yeah,
You did.
I know.
Yeah. Huh. I don't know. To be honest, I really appreciate your honesty. Like, I think that we need to people need to hear, like, other people, like, didn't always pass things. So, you went back and did the exam, or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went back 3 more times.
Oh wow. Do you mind me asking about like what the test was about and like why was there difficulties if that's okay for me to ask?
So, yeah, absolutely. So at that time, the test may have changed, but at that time, the test consisted of 135 multiple choice questions. Each question had 4 answers. And they tell you this right up front. 2 answers are correct, 1 answer is more correct. You have to go off of what the Millwright trades book says. You don't go off of what your experience tells you would be the right answer. You go off of what the manual says is the right answer. So I've been in the trade 12 years. I'm used to thinking I'm going by my experience. I'm not going off of manual. And that was my biggest problem is I was thinking, what would I do in that instance? What would I do in that instance? And the exam is broke down into safety. It's broke down into rigging. I believe there's some hydraulics in there. There's some pneumatics in there. But it's broke down into 5 different areas. If you're not successful on that first attempt, when you get your results back, they put down the score as to how you did in each area, each of those 5 areas. But they do not tell you what questions you got wrong so that you go, oh, really? So you're scratching your head. Okay, so I got 25 questions in safety rate. I got 5 wrong. Okay, well, that's not bad. I got 40 questions in hydraulics or mechanical, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I got 18 wrong. All in all, after my first attempt, I only needed to get 13 more questions right to have gotten my ticket on that first attempt. My next 2 attempts or 3 attempts, I don't remember how many times I wrote, but it was more than 3 times.
Wow.
All of my next attempts, except for the final one, my score got worse and worse and worse.
That's
Yeah, that's insane. I took 4 years off for trying to get my ticket. I finally said, you know what, I don't need my ticket. I'm a maintenance mechanic. I'm a millwright. I'm an unpapered millwright. That's all. I ended up working alongside another guy that had similar struggles getting his ticket. And he pushed me and pushed me and pushed me after working with me for about 6 months. And after almost 2 years of working with him, he finally got me to figure out what it was I needed to be able to go and race my ticket for what he had hoped and I had hoped would be the last time. And it turned out it was the last time. He pushed me. I went seeing a tutor the weekend before I was scheduled to write my exam. And then I went in and I wrote my exam and I was successful.
Well, good for you, but wow, that really, I think it also goes to show like as well, tests can be hard, especially multiple choice, and it's a skill set that it's kind of frustrating. Like I understand on one hand why it's there, but on the other hand, it's sometimes like, in safety, for example, intuitive, you train to be safe and you do those types of things, but then you get a quiz in front of you and you're like, they all sound right or they all sound wrong, and you wish you could just verbally talk it out, and you feel like that would be the way to deal with it. So
I said to the Ministry of Colleges and Trades, is what it was called at that time. I'm not sure if that's what it's still called. Mm-hmm. The lady that was my coordinator, whatever she was called, advisor, I told her straight up after I failed the second time, I said, you give me a piece of equipment. I don't care what it is. It's not running. I guarantee you, I can take it apart, put it back together, and make it work. But you give me a bearing and ask me what kind of a bearing that is. I said, I'll tell you right now, I won't know what kind of bearing that is. I will take that to my supplier, or I'll call my supplier and give them the numbers off the bearing, the dimensions off the bearing. I can do all that stuff. But you ask me what it is, I'm not going to know. You give me a test, a handwritten test, I'm not going to do very well on it. Mm-hmm. I said, my test is making that piece of equipment run, and I can pass that test 95% of the time. But you give me a piece of paper, I can't guarantee you that I'm going to pass. I'm not a book smart guy. I am a hands-on guy. Mm-hmm. I even did a job interview where I went in, and the lady said to me, the HR lady said to me, she says, I hope you don't mind. I have a little test here for you to do. I'll give you a half an hour. You can go and sit in the boardroom and do it by yourself. I'm like, absolutely, not a problem. And I went in and I sat and I read all the questions on this test, and it was 2 pages front and back. I read all the questions. I went through. I did the ones that I knew that popped out right off the top.
Mm-hmm.
And that's maybe 15 minutes in, and she popped her head in. She says, "How are you making out?" I said, "To be honest, I'm not making out worth a damn." She comes right into the river. She says, "Well, what seems to be the problem?" I said, same as I just said about the lady at the ministry. I said, "I'm a hands-on guy. I don't do well on written tests."
Uh-huh.
And I straight up asked her, I said, "What are you looking for in your maintenance guy?" Because I knew they were looking for somebody that had strong PLC skills.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "We need somebody that has strong PLC skills." I said, "Okay, well then, I'm not your guy. I do not have strong PLC skills. I can troubleshoot it. I can make it work, but it's going to take me a lot longer than somebody that has a lot more knowledge and a lot more experience with it." She said, "Well, okay, thank you very much for your honesty and being so upfront. Can I keep your name on file?" I said, "Absolutely." And we parted ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ashamed to admit my inabilities, something I'm not very good at. I'm not ashamed to admit it because everybody's got something they're not good at. You can't be good at everything.
Yeah, well, that's true. And I appreciate you to be honest because, especially I try to be honest and upfront as well about it, but sometimes it's scary, to be honest, to admit your shortcomings. And I think you know that. And I know as long as you're willing to learn, or if you recognize that, it isn't your strength, but you build it up with another area to compensate for that. And that's kind of where also teams come into play, where you can lean on to another person. So I appreciate your honesty for people to recognize that, you might not be well suited for writing tests and all that, but this career path is still, if you're good with your hands, like this is a place that you could do good at. So.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, exactly. My son is 22 years old, and he managed to fall into a Millwright apprenticeship straight out of high school. So he's in his final term of his apprenticeship, and because I'm his dad, I might be a little bit harder on him, and I'm a little more blunt. And I don't think he understands just how challenging this test is. I told him, and he knows. He was young enough, old enough to know I was writing my ticket. That it's not as easy as you think it's going to be.
No.
You just have to go in there prepared, study, do whatever you got to do to try and get that information that was in that manual stuck in your head, and not your experience for the 4 years that you were doing your apprenticeship.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've done the trials and tribulations that you want to just really drive it home. So I guess that would be a perfect time to just ask my last question. What advice would you give a student or a new graduate looking to enter in a career similar to yours?
Ask questions. Ask lots of questions. Don't be afraid to fail.
Easier said than done.
Asking questions sometimes can be as hard or harder than failing.
Were you reading my mind?
No, it can be very difficult. I push 50 years old, and there are things that I hesitate to ask about.
Wow.
I know better, but there's still things that I'm maybe not ashamed, but afraid to ask, or feel that somebody thinks that I should already know the answer to that question. And it might take me a few minutes to build up the courage to say, "Hey, how do you do that?" Or, "Hey, what's that?" I'm not perfect either. And there's sometimes I probably should ask more questions and don't.
Okay. Well, I've asked a lot of questions, and to be honest, it's been really good for me having these experiences to talk to individuals I never would have, and just have their attention. And it's been helping me a lot being able to ask like this, and it's actually been beneficial in my own life. So I encourage people to ask questions because it makes things less scary. Well, thank you so much. I hope I didn't make you wait in your car and you got to your destination, but I really...
Yeah, I'm most of the way home.
Okay, awesome. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I really did get a good perspective because, again, when I was working in QA and such, I didn't really, with timing and all that, even though I could ask questions, it's kind of a black box, the maintenance rule. I wish it wasn't, but this has definitely helped get my understanding about everything. So thank you.
Well, the maintenance guys can be a little bit rough around the edges too, so it's not always the most approachable guy.
Yeah, it's true, and especially to the last point about asking questions. If you get a person that looks intimidating, it's extra hard to ask the question.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. I'm glad I could help you with your questions. I hope it helps guide some of the generations looking or people looking to get into the trade, whether it's millwrighting trade or any other trade. I hope this helps them. Well, yeah, you know what? Maybe I will try that, or maybe not. Maybe this isn't for me after all. I hope my answers will help people with that.
Well, I've learned a lot, and I really hope that is too. So, once again, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I will do my best. I got to work tomorrow, so.
Oh, that's no fun. Well, enjoy your evening.
But I will do my best to enjoy my weekend. You as well, and best of luck on your ventures.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You're welcome. You too.
That was episode 37 of the FoodGrads Podcast. All the notes to this podcast can be found on the FoodGrads blog or by clicking on the Student and Grads tab on the homepage. Do you know anyone you would like me to interview on the show? Perhaps yourself, or maybe there's a specific career path you would like me to explore. Then reach out and let me know. You can email me at veronica@foodgrads.com or any of the FoodGrads social media channels. If you post them out there, it'll get to me. So I hope to hear from you. It was fun talking to Robert about his career. He has this honest, very down-to-earth attitude, which I really appreciated when interviewing him during the episode, as it really allowed me to go deep and understand the nitty-gritty of what he does. Overall, this was a great follow-up episode to Taylor's episode back in episode 35. So if you want to know about her journey actually going to become a millwright mechanic, check that episode out. So following up with this episode, you can see where that potential career path could go if you wanted to become a millwright mechanic. There's a lot of room to grow. So if you are thinking about a career as a mechanic, then I highly encourage you to reach out and talk to someone who's in the field. I have a feeling they'd be very happy to talk about it as the industry is looking for people. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and I will see you next time.